Hello and welcome back to Sweat Capital. Today we are very lucky to be joined by Anthony Liveris, the CEO of Protoaxium. Thank you for joining us, Anthony.
I'm thrilled to be back.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is on the rebrand, you too. I mean, this is a lot of years of work, and it's incredible. It's a really exciting moment.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, you're our first ever repeat guest, so
Yeah.
should also feel honored as well, Anthony. So you're the first to be under the Business of brand and the Sweat Capital brand. So no, it's great for you to be
Which one's
back on.
better?
Yeah, good idea.
No, fantastic. And I must say, listening back to the previous episode you did, there are a couple of interesting calls that you made that at the time, you actually went against the grain a little bit on one of them. Just to give our listeners a bit of context, it was around the time of the US election.
About a year ago now.
Yeah. And obviously has significant background sort of in understanding the key drivers of those campaigns. He said, look, don't count out Trump and Vance at that point in time. And so you've proven to be correct. So the prophecy was somewhat true, Ant.
Look, it was a coin flip, right? So
Yeah.
you never remember if the guy gets it wrong, right? So it's really interesting. I mean, we had a Gaza peace plan announced overnight, right? So I'm sure by the time this comes out, there'll be about 25 more headlines. America lands, right?
There'll be a tariff on me.
On full side
Equity. Sweat Capital, yeah. But it's something I've been reflecting on quite a bit. As the son of two Australians, dad's from Darwin, mom's from Broken Hill, but I don't sound that Australian. I'm not sure if you picked up on. Growing up in a pretty small town, middle of nowhere, Michigan. I mean, we can extrapolate on this as much as you wish to indulge me, right? But it's been sort of, there's all these sort of, the Australian media's coverage of the U.S., its political cycles, the way it makes decisions, I sometimes feel always is it's a bit New York or L.A. focus, and it kind of misses what is really the sort of center of power dynamics, which is this sort of Pennsylvania, through Ohio. It is this great sort of undercurrent, and for a country that just matters so disproportionately to our trajectory, right? Yeah. There's no Australia without the American Revolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the convicts needed to go somewhere if they weren't going to go to the 13 colonies, right? And that's just sort of a quip and anecdotal sort of insight into how the importance of the relationship. It's just something I'm sort of constantly teasing out, and I think, especially for what you guys are building
as well.
You do. Right? Yeah. But no, I mean, we're all trying to build global businesses one way or another, right? And the U.S. always looms so large. And I think sometimes the argument or the insight becomes a bit reductionist into focusing on lobbying around certain tariffs. And it sort of misses some of the meta principles. And yeah, I'm not claiming I have any sort of, more special insight than probably most average punters, but there is something in there on sort of finessing this great libertarian behemoth of the U.S. So, sorry, I'll sort of stop the political science rambling.
No, it's fascinating, and it's like it's amazing how you think about a lot of those learnings and your passion for history that you've had for a long time, and how that's can be useful in your thinking about the contemporary world. There you go.
Yeah, that's a good wrap of that. So we're keen to sort of pick back off where we left off around Proto as well, because again, about a year ago, you sort of made a couple of investments. You'd raised
a lot of money.
Yeah.
From some pretty handy people.
Yeah. And since then, I mean, it's been like a bit of a hockey stick, really. And you've made some great investments. I guess just to rehash on what Proto does and what your sort of mission statement is, and then just a bit of a wrap of what's happened since.
This business model that we've adopted from some of the best biotech investors in the world, right? And we're bringing that model here to Australia is unusual for Australia. I mean, we're investors, but we're not a fund, right?
Yeah.
There's no 2 in 20. There's no management fee. There's no carry.
Where's your ASBCLP?
And so, forget about talking to super, right? Just like the family office or individual that cares about life sciences. I mean, okay, think about the average person you're speaking to, that's probably not where they're thinking they're going to make the lion's share of their capital, right? That they're exposed to whatever resources, realistic, you know what I mean? So you're already starting on the back foot when you talk about health, right? This thing that we all have and share and is arguably the future of this country's best shot on goal for developing critical capacity, right? Sovereign capacity, and something that we actually excel at, right? So you're already sort of starting at, let's call it -10. And then you go to, actually, I'm not a fund manager. I'm not here to return your capital in 7 years. And so you go, Anthony, why would you adopt something like that? And it's because in my view, and I've been a bit vocal about this for better or for worse, I think that model is dishonest to the fundamentals of Australia, right? We are a research economy that produces some of the world's best research, period. We should be a research superpower. And it's this all too common trope, which is despite this high production of research capacity, we have the starkest research to commercialization gap in the world, period, full stop. And like any Gordian knot, right, the interests there are so intertwined and there's no silver bullet. But one of them, the one that I've fallen down a rabbit hole on and have refused to emerge from, is the funding architecture aspect of this. And this is where I think it sort of ties into maybe some of the thematics you talk about at Sweat Cap, which is the reason that this research isn't advancing isn't because the science isn't promising, it's because the money isn't reliable. It's not predictable, right? And when you don't have predictability, you have volatility and you have risk on risk on risk on risk.
And that's not conducive to enduring ecosystems, is it?
Yeah, so Proto goes early, it goes hard, and we do everything we possibly can. We roll up our sleeves and we commit the capital for however long it needs to be committed. And our goal is to create the next 4 CSLs over the next 20 years. Right? We want to create them. We want to go into the university environment, find that next best thing, and it's a very nationalist thing if you think about it, right? We're trying to maximize the downstream economic wins, job multipliers for Australia from Australian research. An uncontroversial statement, but its implementation is incredibly controversial.
And we might just touch on the piece around CSL. Like you wrote an article recently in Capital Brief around sort of where that business is at, and in the modern environment. Can you just touch on CSL and sort of the true impact that anything that happens to CSL and how that sort of flows down into where you guys play?
Yeah, I think the CSL thing really tested our interpretation of sovereign capability, right? We're sort of, for vehicles that are investing in the space, such as NRF or otherwise, right? Everyone's sort of focused on, picking the right fund manager or funding this early stage research. And these are all things I'm very passionate about, don't get me wrong. But the CSL thing actually exposed that our risk isn't just at the beginning, it's at the very end, right?
Yeah.
Because we only have one life sciences company here of significant merit, right? And that's CSL. And when CSL restructures, everything down the supply chain radically feels it. I mean, they issue grants, they're the prime licensing opportunities, they invest in fund managers, they helped build out a lab space.
Yeah, all that infrastructure in Melbourne.
Yeah. And so when their financials aren't stacking, whatever. I'm not going to try to understand the pressures of that boardroom and that CEO, right? I grew up in a corporate household, and I have deep reverence for how hard those jobs are, and they're doing great. That's not the point. The point is they shouldn't be expected to be doing great all the time for Australia's interests, because they won't.
Yeah.
And we as a country, I think, in the sector that we show the most promise in, need to think about how do we build that sustainable, resilient middle for when people do get laid off from CSL, their job opportunities aren't only overseas.
Yep.
Right? Because that's what's happening, right?
Exactly.
When they go through a restructure, they got to go somewhere else. And that's just the beginning of the negative externalities. And so this is where I think just thinking about the supply chain in its entirety, thinking about the national capacity in its entirety behooves us. Yeah.
They're very interesting. And sort of on that public policy piece, what are sort of some of the ways you think that we can make some or get some discussions going to make some positive change on that front?
It's a big question, right? And where do you sort of focus your attention here? One thing I guess I've been more vocal about, and there's pros and cons to this, right? And maybe for your listeners who are perhaps a little bit closer to my age than some of the other people that I perhaps rub shoulders with on a more day-to-day basis, they'll feel this tension that I feel constantly, which is a desire to be impactful and to be deliberate and to potentially disrupt.
Yep.
If you want to create something new, you want to disrupt. But disrupt causes friction.
Yeah.
And you risk, and it's a business risk for anyone, right? Being perceived as, well, you haven't done it. Or you don't know the pain that I've experienced over the last 20 years. What gives you the right to sort of try to claim that you are a vocal voice in this process? And so that's something I've tried to be very thoughtful and conscious about, because that's a very fair point, right? Like, And this is where, someone with an American accent, perhaps a little bit too New Yorker, right?
So to work in your Australian accent.
So spend a few weekends with Will and I, and you'll be sounding just fine, Ed.
Going into the university environment saying faster, 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 it's not going to get me anywhere, right? And so, and that's perhaps that's been my own journey, my own need to be more thoughtful about how to engage these multi-layered government institutions and, for lack of better terms, gatekeepers to progress. And one of the things I've realized there is that as it comes to the commercialization challenge, the government has a hard time assessing risk for new entrants. And it is, of course, their default position to not be necessarily visionary, but more risk averse. And so the primary goal of any new entrant to the market isn't actually to demonstrate performance. It is to demonstrate the capping of downside risk, right? Because that's your audience.
Yeah.
Your audience is a downside risk obsessed audience. And so, okay, great.
Wishing biotech's pretty hard to detect your downside.
Yeah. So we've gathered some of the leading voices in the sector on October 21st to sort of talk about this. How we sort of talk about a realigning of incentives to allow for easier capital flows into the sector, how to pick a diversity of fund managers, and how to better measure against their deployment to make sure that it's being spread across multiple indications, multiple different companies. Because a single fund manager allocating the entirety of government's capital, even if they're the best fund manager in the world, isn't going to invest in a competing product to their portfolio.
No. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just nor should it be their core, first principles capability.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, it was a bit of an open-ended question, and I took it in a very narrow, perhaps overly technocratic sense. But if I had to bring it back to a meta principle of the journey of where do we want public policy to evolve in Australia? We're using these big words, commercialization, sovereign capability, but what does that actually mean from an ethos standpoint? And it's embracing the flow of capital and changing our perception of risk, right? It's a realignment of the goal. Right?
Yep. No,
and it makes sense. Yeah, the funding piece is so important. And it's not like Australian investors aren't used to a bit of risk. Like in my time where I work, I've seen a lot of money raised for these like specky exploration mining projects where you're literally, you're literally just raising coin for like a plot of land where there's a drill rig where you might find something. And so I can't work out in my head when you've got something that's been researched for like years in a lab. It's got met all these criteria.
And could extend your life.
And it's like a hugely positive thing for people's well-being and health. And you can't raise $1 for that, but then you can raise lots of dollars for the other thing. It's it's bewildering. Well, it just goes to show the level of the problem, really. Yeah.
And it's interesting how the first movers in Australia, like you think back to like the Hancocks and those sorts of groups who took risk in relation to
the mining sector,
a sector where we had significant factor endowment and a clear right to play on the global stage.
Yeah.
I think, you obviously see the benefits for the descendants of those initial risk takers are still well and truly seen today. Yeah.
That's really, I mean, if you had to look at the sector where we have the most promise, right? I mean, like, you had a PhD in Australia and not be in remotely near as much debt as you would be in pretty much any other country, right? Like, our research capability, and particularly within life sciences, our world-class health system, I mean, this is where we are genuinely endowed. I think part of that inflection point is taking what is a bit of a jack of all trades and becoming world leaders in specific indications, right? Because we are a middle power. We're a rising middle power of, multifaceted import to the world.
Yeah.
But we can't just sort of keep on sort of plateauing, right? And everyone knows this. It's not
it's uncontroversial.
But it's like, how does the private sector help government at least better inform their stance on this? And because we are quite a fractious commonwealth by the nature of how the states came together and decision making, states loom large in this as well. And I think part of that journey is also pointing out to, because we have upcoming state elections in New South Wales and elsewhere, right? This means jobs.
Yeah.
And I do think this will the negative externalities of not doing this right are starting to manifest because you kind of have this dormant research base. And like we said with CSL, right, jobs are being lost.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you sort of get on the front foot of that, turn a press release into something a little bit more sustainable?
Yep. No, it makes a lot of sense. And so functionally and sort of day to day in your role at Protoaxium, all of these issues, those macro issues, are all interplayed sort of with what you do. But yeah, can you give us a bit of an update, sort of where's Proto at today? What are some of the bets you've made over in recent times? And yeah, give us a bit of context there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're a company creator, right? So we raise capital into our top co, and we go into the academic environment and build assets, right? And our first company I would have maybe spoken about on the last time we spoke, but it just really helps illustrate this. It was unpublished academic research at the University of Sydney. It was pursuing a very specific indication for type 1D, effectively an oral insulin pill.
Yeah.
Really interesting, but unpublished, right? We formed a company around that, introduced a separate indication around immune modulation, right? So attach a whole nother technical program to it, took it out of the academic environment, and now it's going into 2 first-in-human studies. Right, it's been
exciting times for that's Nick and the team.
Nick and the team, yeah. I mean, his research has now been published in Nature Nature, right? So it just really helps illustrate for something that isn't exactly on, and it's not against the university. It's just the capacity to analyze the commercial value of every asset.
It's not their remit.
Unpublished research into going into humans. That's the sweet spot of Australia. I mean, it's beyond just the clinical trials network and the rebate. It's more material than that.
Yeah.
It's the IP. It's our brains.
Yeah.
It's not our services. It's our brains.
Yeah. It's how iron ore or coal or whatever. Yeah. It's the resource. And I keep coming back to that in my head. And
we've raised close to 50 million over the last 4 years.
Wow.
A lot of institutional US support, an increasing audience amongst Australians, and I've been really grateful for that. And we've created 4 assets, and we've been a follow-on investor in 1 that makes sense within our broader thesis. But
yeah,
from if a VC was talking, it'd be like, that's not a lot of deals, and I'd say that's right.
Yeah.
Because when we do this, we do incubation, accelerated, kind of hollow words, right? What do they actually mean? To me, at least, and as particularly within our sector, and the answer is it's just so bespoke, right? Companies face different pressures, different needs, whether that's accounting, future financing, technical insights, clinical trial design.
Yeah.
But the goal is to iterate off of this and create singular playbooks, right? So it becomes, the economies of scale become pretty clear.
Yeah.
Right. But for a fairly young organization, there's 34 of us, in various arrangements, right? Yeah. But that can deploy down into each of these assets
at any given time.
At any given time. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's awesome. And just before you said that asset was in unpublished research, how do you even find that in the first place? And I guess because then I'm thinking like, how much good stuff is out there that's in unpublished research that people just aren't seeing?
Yeah, look, I mean, and by I mean not me at all, obviously, right? It's Lindsay and Laura and the incredible people at Proto. Lindsay, for that specific one, had attended a couple, lectures or various conferences and sort of heard Nick speaking and was always on his radar, right? But it's just that, and that's not very scalable, right?
Yeah,
part of the, I was on a call this morning, other unnamed people talking about how to improve the tech transfer process, right? Because it's one of the sort of things, to the heart of your question, Will, is, where's my market store? Like, where's the supermarket for all this research? And it doesn't exist. Like, I walk in the academic environment, I have no idea what the goods are. I have no idea what their price is. I have no idea how long it will take me to check out.
Yeah.
Right. And nor does the seller. Seller doesn't know if they want you, to sell it all or maybe just 10% of it over a guaranteed period of time. They don't know if they'll still be in the job 8 months from now. Like, it's just, and to be clear, that's not the norm globally. All right. But it seems to be, and this is sort of back to your public policy question, there is an ingrained interest to keep it opaque for certain operators. Right. And so how do you overcome that? How do you overcome entrenched interest of opacity?
Yeah.
It's not always, being vocal on LinkedIn, right? But somebody's got to. Right?
Someone could put their hand up.
Yeah. So I volunteer Charlie as tribute.
Fantastic. And so, like you mentioned Lindsay earlier, and I always find it interesting, within a sporting team context, you've often got a star player and
yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And throwing you know, all your chips in one basket's often, you know, the thing that a coach will do at a particular time when they think it's the time to go. You guys made a decision to back one of Lindsay's companies, or not one of Lindsay's companies at that point in time, but some research that Lindsay was behind.
Hell yeah.
Can you talk through sort of how you guys got comfortable with that decision? Because obviously he's such a core part to the broader Proto journey as well.
You know, he is our LeBron James. Like he's amazing. Look, his research in particular is a bit of a startup of an old soul, and it's actually perfectly illustrates what bad funding architecture can do to really promising Australian research. I won't bore you with like the ups and downs of that corporate history, but the point is everyone agrees it's an awesome opportunity, but because of other people's actions, it was never able to break through.
Yeah.
So it actually took us 18 months to get off the hands of what was then the previous owner.
Right.
And since then, it's just been all shots on goal. I mean, it's way oversubscribed. We don't need any more money.
Go away.
Really, I mean, I
Knows a form of raising though.
it's been really funny with Lindsay too, because like he's just been in a permanent fundraising mode for that asset for so long. He's like, Ant, do I have to say no to this? I'm like, Lindsay. You know, no, it's I'm really just happy for him, because it's a really, so the technology is leveraging his research and longevity right around specifically NAD to improve IVF, right, to make the cycles more effective, right, and because of the way the technology works, it actually is on an expedited regulatory pathway.
Wow.
So it's going to go from, you know, preclinical to potentially commercial sales within 18 to 24 months. And it's a really exciting piece of Australian research. And look, if this works, it's going to save people a lot of money, a lot of time during a very emotional, you know, it's IVF.
Yeah.
Like it's not the easiest, you know, so it's really important. It's at the heart of a lot of sort of more global macro challenges we're facing as a world, right? I mean, with declining fertility rates, you know, helping women stay in the workforce long. There's all these overlapping thematics to it. One of the things that I think just helps reinforce how exciting of an asset this is Dr. Stephanie Allen, you know, the former APAC lead for healthcare for Kearney, has actually joined us as the CEO, and she is just terrific. So to have someone like that sort of be willing to take it kind of says it all, to be honest. Yeah.
No, fantastic. And you on a slightly like I know you mentioned IVF, but on the note of kids, you've had you're a dad since the last time we caught up in this forum.
Can't promise anymore from like a year from now. Just let me settle in first. Yes.
I'm getting the first one right.
Could you how's that changed your ability to do all of the above? And how are you finding that from a general life perspective?
I mean, obviously, you know, you can't sort of start to answer this without being, you know, I've married the most amazing woman in the world, and she's the most beautiful mother. So let's start with there, and everything else I say is sort of just sprinklings on top to that, right? No, I think we were kind of reflecting on this earlier, and I've been asking a lot of my mentors, like, the how of this, and none of them give a good reply. You know, your 30s seem to be this decade where you're expected to both build your career and build your family simultaneously, right? It is a bit of that, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's very hard.
But and so, you know, people sort of throw out things about like work-life integration, and you know, but those the times we're in are changing as well, right? As they should be. You know, one of the personal reflections it's giving me is, I think, because you want to be the best role model to your kids. I mean, it's probably one of the primary jobs. It's also kind of forced me to reflect on what is genuine impact. You know, okay, I'm not just running Proto to improve tech transfer processes at universities, right? That's not the world I'm going to leave little Alexander one day, right?
Be proud of your dad, Alex. He's an improved tech transfer.
That's my guy. And I'm not going to claim I have any answers to it, but I have been going on that journey a bit, and it's, you know, my heart is so full, and I don't know what else to say, really.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has the answers to that. Hey, like, it seems to be just like a very personal thing too, and always evolving. Yeah, must be a cool time. But yeah, just more broadly on being, I guess, a CEO. Like, a lot of our listeners of, you know, ambitious young people that are keen to maybe one day be in like your shoes, for example, leading a organization such as Proto, something making, you know, real change. What sort of, this is probably quite a broad question, but like what sort of steps and what sort of skill sets you need to build out to get to that point where you can actually go, look, I'm actually ready to run this? Or do you sort of learn as you go as well?
Yeah, all of the above, right? I've been overly privileged in a lot of ways. One of the ways I've been most spoiled is with just ridiculous mentors throughout my life. And I think by interviewing literally all of Australia, you two probably have the same.
Very lucky. Yeah.
Okay. And, look, you cobble together their advice and try to make it work for yourself. There's no singular way of running a business, right? I mean, there's multiple different models for being a CEO. Some are more macro, some are more true operator types. For me, I've gone on this journey with Apple Cart, and I've had exposure to other businesses where maybe I'm a founder, but I'm not exactly in the executive role. And the best you can do is try to learn from yourself on what's worked for you, where you found the most impact, where are you generally most impactful to your organization, how do you do that in a sustainable way, and going from that 0 to 1 to 1 to 2 to that 2 to 5. I think Proto's probably in that 5 to 10 real gas period right now. And that's exhilarating, right? It's there's more people, there's a buzz, but I'm trying to think through those sorts of questions. What can I genuinely hand off and empower people to do? And so, that's probably not the most concise answer. For those that are thinking about giving something a go, I want to celebrate you, but you also need to have some part of your brain that recognizes you're a bit of a lunatic.
That's a good point.
Right, because there's also that, right? I'm going to go against all the odds to prove everyone wrong, that I have some unique insight, or maybe it's not even my insight, but I believe in it so much that I'm going to devote myself to it for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
If you're actually going to do it, it's at least, cut in 10 years, right? Anything less is,
Self-job.
And so to be in the position to even enter that mental calculation, just try to have awareness of that, and try to have awareness of, why you're doing it, what's actually driving you. Don't just start something because you want to be an entrepreneur. It's a shallow word, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I actually read an old article that Larry Marshall wrote about entrepreneur being quite a shallow word, that he didn't necessarily think it didn't carry a great connotation at the point in time when he was writing this article, and he thinks there's a lot more nuance to it, and that whole point around accepting that you are a bit of a lunatic, but also probably bring some genuine value to whatever the underlying cause or that you're trying to change. And so it's interesting that you've picked up on that point too.
I just listen to everything Larry says, and I try to.
And so one of the ways that you add value to Proto is obviously you've raised a lot of money. So
it helps, yeah.
Yeah. So and in a business where it's incredibly capital intensive, raising money is so important. One of the things that we were thinking when we were preparing for the podcast, a lot of our guests who will one day, if you become a startup founder or if you work in corporate finance, wherever you work, you've got to sell at some point an opportunity to someone. How do you think through the capital raising process?
I think one of the meta principles that I've adopted is to be very conscious of measuring expectations, and to overly index on transparency and honesty versus what I think the other person wants to hear. It helps you fail faster if it's just not going to convert.
Yeah.
Right? Because you get to the truer incentive alignment very quickly. For Proto, if I'm going to be honest about the sector I'm in, it's a 10 to 20 year hold.
Yeah.
Right? It's not necessarily a dividend issuing asset. It's not the point. The assets need capital. Right? So imagine rocking up to a family office, and they're, the principal there's, 65, and saying, look, I think the right steward of this capital would say, you'll see your return in 20 years as one potential outcome. Now there's outliers to this, but you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Right. That's not exactly intuitive to converting.
Yeah.
Right? But I'll tell you, every time I lead with that framing, it has a much higher hit rate than sort of saying, well, look, in 7 years, we're going to be hitting 20%, just like Blackstone. It's
Because they've heard that pitch.
And it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
So I think that's another lane we're sort of swimming in, is just trying to be more honest about the sector here, and not trying to just bash on it for the sake of it, but also trying to just talk about the realities of where the moonshots may be.
Yeah.
So that's been a big meta principle of mine. I mean, the second, and it's a privilege to be able to say this, but IR never stops.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying be choosy with your capital, because like, I mean, everyone, but it's just being more thoughtful about it, because during that sort of conversion process, one thing I've been thinking a lot about is we have very significant institutional support from, global asset allocators. But it's just been a different process trying to find institutional support in Australia. And I think that's something we should just pull the thread on a little bit more.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about it.
Yeah.
A bit like, so the process on finding institutional support in Australia, like, where do you start, like, in that sort of, minefield?
I think it's an education exercise on the model, right? I mean, and just name dropping, Roy Vaughn, Syncona, Flagship Pioneering doesn't mean much to them.
Yeah.
Even if they are, like, some of them are invested in some of those assets, for instance, but it's like, well, you could do that in America, but in Australia, I understand, I don't know, right? But you have to take them on the education process for what the actual business model is and why. And now, look, it doesn't work. And like, also, what does institutional even mean here, right? Are we just talking about super?
Yeah.
There's all these problems, and I'm probably actually a little bit less vocal on we should tell super how to allocate their money than some of my contemporaries. Right? It's like, okay, the self-serving thing of me would be to say super should be mandated to only invest in companies that look like Proto, right, and other venture capitalists, right? Right? Like, that's a version of what you're hearing right now.
Absolutely.
I'm not necessarily signing that petition,
Yeah.
but I think there's probably a broader conversation on how does capital flow, and how does it get measured, and how can people opt in to choosing their risk profile, and is there a better way of sort of having a public conversation about that?
Cool.
Yeah. Would that look like when I have my super fund, like I can actually switch on like a biotech segment of my portfolio? I want to put like 5% into that. Is that sort of what it looks like tangibly?
I think so too. It's also like a definitions thing. Like, what does biotech mean? Like, do you want to spread it across to all the MRIs? Do you want to sort of put it in, and I just sort of think we have, because our lived experience has been narrow with it, we've only known really one model of investing through it, whereas the rest of the world has adopted like 20 different models. Like, what I do is not it's not a single business model. Like, company creation, it's a landscape. There are so many different ways of interpreting biotech company creation that have made, I mean, the most egregious example, egregious is the wrong word, exaggerated example is Roy Vaughn, right?
Yeah.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
For those that don't know his story, I mean, he cobbled together a couple assets for like $5 million off of GSK and SPAC'd it for $7.1 billion 7 years later, right? So, like, I mean, if you do that, you should run for president, which he rightfully concluded, right? But that's just one interpretation of the business model. Vivek was very savvy with the way he constructed those businesses, and he actually had a kind of, like, if you think about the bookends, actually had a pretty authoritarian operating model. Everything was very centralized. The vaults didn't get spun out until they're at a certain point in development. It's very savvy, very savvy. But that's just one example. On the other end, you kind of have Flagship Pioneering, which has multiple fund vintages that capture different risk profiles. For the assets at the very beginning, they don't even give them the names, they give them numbers, and they have kill switches. They're very comfortable being ruthless with the researchers. I'm not saying that's what we should do here, but I'm just sort of painting out, like, all of this is common knowledge to an overseas investment market.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't explain any of this.
Yeah.
Whereas here, I find that I have to kind of go through, if I get to this point in the conversation, and I just think it's for a sector that we're like so awesome at. Let's have the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to agree. There's probably not a lot to lose from a chat. No, it makes sense. And in sort of setting the strategy around how Proto's thought about its North Star, I imagine, you've got a pretty impressive board of directors who sit there, and I imagine are constantly bouncing ideas off. How do you think about sort of this, A, setting the North Star firstly, and then B, breaking that down into sort of bite-sized operational functions?
So the North Star is the 4 CSLs over 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. That one's clear.
Yeah.
That is concrete. It is doable. Right. Right. And if you raise the right capital stack, you can start to break that down. And your question was, how do I sort of start to delineate internally on that?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, the beginning of it sounds like a normal VC firm. You start to scout for things. You have people that do that, a science function. They run it exhaustively through our, people that have taken drugs to market. But they're looking for something in particular. They're looking for that cross-functionality platform capability.
Yeah.
And just to, I mean, I'm sorry for your listeners that don't live in this space. but like, platform technologies or binary assets sort of is kind of the delineation within, therapeutics.
Yeah.
They mean what they sound like. Platform means it can be a lot of different things. I think of a drug capsule they can jam a lot of stuff into, whereas binary is it's either works or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Most of the existing biotech investors in Australia prefer binary.
Yeah.
For reasons that make sense within a short fund cycle, right? Because you kind of just want to get there.
You sort of just want to know either way. Like, yeah.
You're judged by IRR and MOIC, and you kind of need to reach that timeline.
Yeah.
Right? You
Time matters for the IRR count.
Yeah, you don't have time to be messing around with all these
Yeah.
various animal studies that may prove for something other interesting. It's the wrong model.
Well, yeah, your incentive, it ultimately just comes down to how you get paid, doesn't it? Like the incentives.
So the VC structure isn't going to build the next CSL. That's the point, right? Because you need a platform technology that can be more than just one thing. That's the heart of the insight, right? Is that you need a different way of thinking about your capital stack.
Well, that ultimately is CSL. Like they, as you say, they're a platform of, and the Pfizer's, all of them. They've got, and they're at the scale now where they can sort of outsource the R&D to the smaller biotech ecosystem. When one's interesting, they take it on and say, we'll take it from here, guys. Like, but as you rightly say, they're not single asset plays. And so
because this science happens in the real world, right? Like it's one of the most common questions is how is AI going to disrupt your space? And it's like, yeah, maybe a little bit, but very little, right? Because this has to go through safety, efficacy. That's not going to be upended, right? The actual process of creating them all, you can't just AI that.
No,
And so you're still looking at that 10 to 12 year window. And so this sort of second part of our core thesis here is if everything is going tremendously well, you've absolutely shot the moon out. 10 years is too short to be selling on the asset.
yeah.
Right? You've done it. You've made it.
Yeah.
yeah. Why would you sell?
We're just at the upside.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good analogy for that, but or sorry, a good like for like. Yeah. No, I can think of one, just not appropriate for this.
What's that? I'll float.
Fantastic. And so, like, more generally, and sort of coming towards the back end of our discussion, like you spoke about internally your team and how there's this great buzz and what are some of the key traits that you look for in prospective employees? Because I do come across in my own like relationships, people who are doing biomed or finance, and they're like, oh, this life sciences space seems pretty cool. You talk a bit about it, Charlie. Like, what do you look for in prospective talent?
I think one of the loneliest parts of being a founder CEO type is you know that you always have the most to lose, right? You just know that instinctively. And
Reputationally, probably financially, probably, like all that.
And so you're actually looking to share that load, right? I mean, that's probably the most primal urging.
Yeah.
And so the way of answering your question for me is the thing that's always stood out to me with the people that is that ownership mentality. Like put aside ESOP, like whatever it is, or the equity. Like, it's actually something that transcends the contract, or it's what is Proto to them. Yeah. Do they feel that sense of ownership of the outcome that I feel? And when they don't, I can tell. I mean, you could tell too, right? And that doesn't mean you're on vacation with your family and I need you at your laptop 24/7. That's not what that means. Right. And so, look, that's it's an intangible, but like at its core, that's it. Right. Because you can forgive 90% of everything else if you know that they feel that sense of that outcome is associated to my actions. Right. Like, I mean, skills are, mostly learned. Right.
Yeah. How do you test for that? Like, because if I'm thinking about I'm in your shoes trying to hire someone, got to be hard to sense that,
get that
over a couple of, coffees or whatever your hiring process might be.
I guess it's a fail fast, potentially,
but that's toxic. Right? Yeah. Like, I mean, it's hard to, move people out of roles.
Yeah, particularly in a small organization.
In a small country. Yeah. Or in a small sector. You don't want to be seen as, like, there's all these considerations to it, right? Yeah. No, it's a nuanced question. I mean, I don't have any sort of
Oh yeah, if you don't have the secret sauce, then the answer.
Oh, so you're telling me we've got you on again, and you don't have the answer.
To be fair, that's probably the first time we've asked him that. So maybe when we get him on next year, we ask again.
Yeah,
this
is
It's tough. I mean, you guys are people readers, right? You've sat around the boardroom with some of Australia's best leaders, and what have they said to that question? Like, I'm very curious.
no, I don't think anyone can truly, like, I just don't think you can answer it.
I reckon those people that we've spoken to have said that you can tell after like a couple of years, or like, you know, once they've been in the job, they can tell who's going to be
long
good.
time.
But until then, yeah, it's tough, I think.
Actually, no, I lie. The one person, so your dad,
No.
he spoke about when he was at Dow,
Yeah.
the global body, they had a true understanding of what the future talent of their business looks like.
Yeah. The book.
The book. And so there were people in the book, and your dad was one of the people in the book. This guy from Darwin, Australia.
That's a good catch line.
Yeah, was in the book. And so clearly Dow had a good knack for that at that point in time. So I would say probably the closest or
It's
the
still intangible, right? Like I don't reckon they've gone
It's
like
still-
because of XYZ reasons. It's just
But-
like a name in the book, probably. I don't know.
it's still a willingness to back.
How'd you choose each other as business partners? Well, what do houses look like? Have you been asked that yet?
No,
No, I mean,
not on here for sure. I don't think we have. Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, on one of your podcasts, you know, Larry Marshall speaks about the co-founder being a sacred relationship.
Yeah.
Right? And that to me continues to compound. I mean, so many different things, and there's a lot of depth in that answer. But you know, you two, did you know that you would each be as bought into this on day one? I mean,
yeah, I reckon we did. Yeah,
Yeah, we never
like-
really sort of questioned it.
No, we just, and then it was sort of like, you know, that flow state you get in.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were always kicking goals, but like stuff would just happen for us, and we would just somehow keep lining up interviews and big names that just sort of,
We're probably each laid out 10 grand, like lost 10 grand each of like probably more even potentially
Really, yeah.
on this. And never once have we really questioned
Right.
why we're doing that.
yeah.
And I think, and once again, I can't answer why that is, but you do just sort of know. And there was a guy who spoke at a thing we had for work yesterday, incredibly bright guy. He said, passionate people can change the world. And it was really eye-opening what passion meant for him when hiring people. And he said he would rather have someone who's passionate, not as technically proficient any day of the week, and someone who's incredibly technically proficient but doesn't give a stuff about the place they work. He said his learning is get rid of them straight away.
Really?
Yeah, and there's some research that he referred to that shows if you do have the means to get rid of them straight away, and then sometimes there's settings where you might need them for a certain reason, but he said if you can get rid of them straight away, because the passion's what takes you forward. And so that really resonated for me.
Well, you guys are growing young managers as well, right? You're building out your team, and it's an exciting chapter, right? And you know, it's like anything else. There's no shortcuts, right, for all these anecdotal experiences. So
Sweat capital.
Sweat capital.
Sweat capital.
Yeah.
Awesome.
where's the merch?
Well, that's next. Thanks, Dan. Thank you so much for coming on. Like, this forum probably represents 0.05% of the time that you give to supporting us, and so it means an awful lot to have you as a key backer, and it's why you were the first person that we're going, who of our list do we want to have a go on again, and it was you. So thank you very much for coming on.
I'm really honored. Thank you so much, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.